If you haven't heard about this, well, you're going to hear about it now. In fact, it's being crushed by the fact checkers on the interwebs. 1,200 scientists and scholars say that there is no climate emergency. Now, led by Nobel Prize laureate, more than 1,200 scientists and scholars have signed a document declaring climate science is based more on personal beliefs and political agendas than any sound, rigorous science. And it's about time. Now, the World Climate Declaration, which we are going to link to you for free, you're welcome, states that climate science should be less political, while climate policies should be more scientific. It can't be more blunt than that. In fact, scientists should openly address uncertainties and exaggerations in their predictions of global warming, while politicians should dispassionately count the real costs as well as the imagined benefits of their policy measures, according to the declaration. And they do not. In fact, they're destroying the planet we live on, and you know that because you're living here. Now, the declaration was organized by Climate Intelligence, an independent policy foundation founded in 2019 by Dutch emeritus professor of geophysics Guus Berkhout and Dutch science journalist Marcel Kraak. Both of these experts in their field. Now, according to the UK website, The Daily Skeptic, one of the lead authors of the declaration, atmospheric physicist Richard Lindzen, has called the current climate narrative absurd. Yet, relentless propaganda from grant-dependent academics and agenda-driven journalists has generated a widely accepted narrative that the science is settled. Shut up, Al! Get in your hole! And I quote, "We should free ourselves from the naive beliefs in immature climate models," the WCD states. In future, climate research must give significantly more emphasis to empirical science, which they do not. Their models are flawed, they're over-exaggerated, and they miss the mark by 500%. So that's not even science. That's bad anything. Now, last week, President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, which spends $368 billion for quote-unquote green energy, with the aim of reducing CO2 emissions by 40% by 2030. Now, when Joe Biden was vice president under Barack Obama, the administration subsidized green energy with federal grants and tax breaks. Joe Biden himself announced in 2009 a $535 million loan guarantee for the solar panel company Solyndra, to go along with $700 million in venture capital funding. Biden said the plant built with that money would power more than 500,000 homes. But 2 years later, the company filed for bankruptcy and shut down its operations. That's after the government wasted $1.2 billion on a failed green energy project. Now, the World Climate Declaration points out that since emerging from the Little Ice Age in the mid-19th century, the world has warmed significantly less than predicted by the UN's International Panel on Climate Change Models. And here we're looking at the average of 102 IPCC CMIP5 climate model runs in red and the actual observations in blue and green. A separation of a massive amount. In fact, they were totally incorrect. Now, the gap between the real world and the modeled world tells us that we are far from understanding climate change. Or they're simply lying to us for an ends to the means. Now, the declaration argues Earth's climate has varied with cold and warm periods for as long as the planet has existed. And I know that because I'm a paleoclimatologist. And this data is, well, it is as common knowledge as the lines in my hand. And so the Declaration argues that this natural variability has been occurring for as long as the planet existed. And it's no surprise that we are experiencing a period of warming after the Little Ice Age. Hello? Now, the climate models are not remotely plausible as global policy tools because they're off by up to 500%. Ignoring also, for one, the benefits of carbon dioxide, which is not a pollutant, it's plant food. And the Earth is woefully deficient in carbon dioxide. We are at the lowest levels for the last 600 million years. And if we drop much lower, life will cease to exist. So the idea of cutting carbon dioxide based on that information alone is lunacy. Carbon dioxide is essential to all life on Earth. And according to the Declaration, photosynthesis is a blessing. More CO2 is beneficial for nature and the greening of the Earth. And additional CO2 in the air has promoted growth in global plant biomass, even confirmed by NASA. It's also good for agriculture and increases the yield of crops worldwide, which is why they pump carbon dioxide in commercial greenhouses 3 times the current level on Earth. Now, there is no statistical evidence, the signatories say, that global warming is intensifying. And that's back here in the There Is No Climate Emergency, which you're going to get for free on this PDF linked below. So there is no statistical evidence, according to the signatories, that global warming is intensifying, that hurricanes are intensifying, in fact, they're decreasing, that floods are intensifying, in fact, they're just repeating the same levels from hundreds of years ago, that droughts and other natural disasters are intensifying, because they are not. And many of us, like Tony Heller and myself, have pointed out the data sets, but no one cares about facts. There is no climate emergency. We strongly oppose the harmful and unrealistic net zero CO2 policy proposed for 2050. Last year, Stephen Koonin, an undersecretary of science in the Obama administration, published a book titled Unsettled that said, the science is insufficient to make useful projections about how the climate will change over the coming decades, much less what our actions should be. Now, the idea that climate change is settled demeans and chills the scientific enterprise. It actually retards the progress in these important matters, and it's been going on since I left academia 3 decades ago. Now, in 2020, the longtime green activist Michael Shellenberger wrote a book called Apocalypse Never that lamented the conversation about climate change has spiraled out of control, and I concur. It has reached levels of absolute lunacy and lies and unadulterated, adulterated graphs like the hockey stick. And the fact checkers, well, they're paid for by these globalists. So, of course, a letter stating there's no climate emergency repeats inaccurate claims about climate science. Now, that might be true, but modern climate science has nothing to do with science. It has nothing to do with the climate either. It's a moniker for propaganda that's bought and paid for by the money funders. And that's a boon to knowledge. If you have any questions, leave them below. I don't think I could be any clearer than that. There is no climate emergency. It's all propaganda thanks to the Smith Modernization Act, and times are changing. 1,200 scientists and scholars are now stepping up to the plate. and putting their mouth where their money is, on the dotted line. There is no climate emergency. Period.